Welcome to 3 Books with Neil Pasricha, where each chapter we uncover and discuss the 3 most formative books of an inspiring individual. We believe books change lives, and that's why we are the only podcast in the world by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians. Thanks so much for joining us. Did you know Judy Blume owns, operates, and works in a bookstore? An independent bookstore named Books and Books down in Key West, Florida. Yes, that's right. 80-year-old Judy Blume, author of such classics as Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, and one of my personal favorites, Blubber, whose books tackle topics from everything from menstruation to masturbation to teen sex, whose books are often at the top of the most banned or most censored lists, who's the winner of over 90 reading and writing awards across the world, who sold over 85 million copies of her books. Judy Blume works in her own independent bookstore. Let's fly down there together right now, pull up a table, sit in the corner, and let's uncover and discuss Judy Blume's 3 most formative books. Oh, wow. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Neil.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me inside your store.
I know.
Here in Key West. It's a beautiful place. I feel like I just landed. I just changed into shorts and t-shirt because I was boiling from my suit. And where are we?
We're in fabulous Key West, Florida.
It feels like heaven. It's hot and sunny and everyone's relaxed and carefree eating shrimp.
Oh, I'm allergic to shrimp, so I don't eat shrimp. But and I don't know that everybody's relaxed and carefree, but it is a wonderful, magical place.
What makes it special to you?
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we came here like everyone 23 or 4 years ago. I was finishing a book and it was winter in New York and I wanted to be in a warm and sunny place for a month. And after we stayed for a month, we never wanted to leave. And that's the way it is with Key West. You either fall madly in love and you never want to leave, or it's like, wait, I don't get this place. Get me out of here.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. It attracts the right people because Dave Barry had written that Florida sometimes attracts people, but they're more transient and there's less of a community. But Key West seems the opposite of that.
Key West isn't Florida.
Yeah.
Oh. Key West is its own special place.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, we just set up a tiny little table here in the main area of the bookstore. To my right, I see a beautiful carpet. On top of that, a circular table with some nice books by the front door. Behind me is the bestseller shelf. To your right is the cards, which we may be blocking for a few minutes.
I pick every one of those out myself.
Did you really?
Yeah, I especially love this one.
Oh. It says there's a small girl riding a bunny, and it says, before Alice got to Wonderland, she had to fall pretty hard down a deep hole. I open it. It says, her gift was a lifetime of adventures.
I like that.
That's beautiful.
I like that.
How do you curate cards? Are you is there a magazine that you choose them from? Or?
No, I just
actually don't put that back.
Oh, okay.
I want to both purchase that and take a picture of it because I think it's really special.
Okay, here you get an envelope to go with it.
Is that a pink one?
A bright pink one.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
It's funny I don't know if you ever do this when you buy a card. I'm like, I want that other envelope.
But you could have that other envelope
No,
here. We wouldn't stop you.
Well, I really appreciate you welcoming me down here, and I've brought with me a thank you. And this thank you is my old tattered copy of Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I was in a group chat last night with my mom, my dad, and my sister, telling them how excited I was to chat with you. And it spawned, I can show you this after the chat, I spawned a huge conversation in the text of my mom, my dad, and my sister telling all of their memories of me walking around the kitchen, reading this book, pretending to be Fudge, saying, Pita, Pita, no, all the lines. And my mom says, this is where you found your voice, Neil. And now today, I'm 38. I'm interviewing you with my voice on this, the only show in the world by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians, 3 books. So I want to say thank you, because I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for this book when I was a child. So
I'm
thank you.
very glad that it was special for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's talk about your books. I see you've brought a couple with you. And
Well, I thought you wanted me to talk about books that were special to me.
I do. And special and formative, like shaped you in some interesting way.
Well, who knows about that? I don't know about that. I mean, the books that made me into a reader, that made me love reading. I think I always loved stories.
Yeah.
I think, mostly I made them up inside my head. But having a book, I mean, my mother was a very private, shy, quiet woman, but she loved to read. And she took me to the public library in Elizabeth, New Jersey every week. And I would say I was 3, maybe I was 4, probably 4. And we went to the children's room, and it was up, you couldn't get in from the main, at least I don't think you could get in from the main entrance to the library. You went up a rickety staircase. I would say that they were wooden, but maybe they were metal steps. I don't know. And it was, I think it made sounds, and it was like, oh my God, it looked like so many steps to a little kid, but you kept going, you kept going, you kept going. And when you got to the top and you went through the door, and then my mother just left me. I mean, I don't mean that she left me. She must have been sitting somewhere.
Well, what decade was this? So we can get a mental sense of it, not to...
Well, if I was 4, I was born in 1938, so it would have been...
1942.
Early 40s.
During the war, even.
Probably, yeah.
So you're alone in the kids' room.
I don't think I'm alone. I think my mother is there somewhere.
A watchful eye in the distance.
But I wasn't, and I was a very anxious kid, so I have no memory of being anxious, that I was sitting on the floor by myself, and I can't picture where my mother was or anybody else. It was just heaven, because I was alone on the floor, pulling out books from the shelves and sniffing them. I love to sniff books. I still sniff books whenever if a book of mine is published, I sniff it first.
Why?
Because it's something that I remember, the smell of the books. I mean, it was like a ripe blangie, but that had been used by so many different kids. And it's funny that my mother, who was so worried and anxious herself, she never thought about these books having been touched,
germs
put in the mouths of other children. And it was there on the floor that I found the book Madeline. And Madeline became the first book that I loved. And also, when we brought Madeline home from the library, and after, I don't know when, I hid it because I didn't want my mother to take it back. And I hid it in the back of my kitchen. I had a drawer that was full of my toys and things. The first drawer closest to the floor in the kitchen. And I put it way in the back, and I put things over it and around it. And I kind of knew that this was bad, but I wasn't going to give it up. Of course, if my mother had known, she would have bought me my own copy.
Yes.
We had a bookstore in Elizabeth, the Ritz Bookshop. And when I got a little bit older, I would go there on my own with 25 cents allowance. That's another story, though. But anyway, Madeline, when it was time to take it back, my mother said, "Where is it?" I was like, I don't know where it is. And of course, I couldn't then take it out in front of my mother and look at it, but I just knew that it was there. And I memorized it. I couldn't read. I memorized it.
So you memorized it, but you could not pull it out again because of fear of discovery of theft.
I guess
right?
I've never thought of that. I don't really know. Maybe I did. And there's a page in there that I changed the rhyme because I couldn't remember it. Something about a crack on the ceiling has the habit of sometimes looking like a rabbit. But I think I changed it because I couldn't remember. A crack on the ceiling is so funny, it sometimes looks just like a bunny.
Oh, you not only did you change it, you created a new rhyme in its place.
I did.
Oh, wow. Well,
I loved it so much.
And you have it here.
I still love
I'm holding
it.
It's a big hardcover. It's a physically large book, and it says,
Oh, everybody knows Madeline.
Everyone-
It's the first book that I bought when my daughter was born.
"Oh, wow."
That I bought for her library. And years later, when I was moving to another house, I saw that in the back, she had pasted a little pocket for a library card.
Who had pasted that?
My daughter.
Oh, wow.
Because she used to play librarian just like I used to play librarian. And I used to play librarian because I loved and wanted desperately to have, and this goes back so far, you wouldn't even remember. You've never seen such a thing, but librarians had a pencil, and on that pencil was a little stamp. And so the librarian could stamp the card when you took it out with that pencil.
Right.
And she could also write something with it.
Right.
And
I did have that when I was a wee child.
Yes.
And they had that big compartment with all the little tiny doors that pulled out like the cue card, like the card system.
Oh, the cards. Yes, we had. Yes, ours was vertical and little doors that pulled out.
And your daughter created that to be a librarian.
Yes, she pasted little pockets on the back of her and made little cards so that she could, I guess, pretend that her readers were taking out these library books.
I love that.
And
My wife Leslie used to wear glasses around as a 4-year-old for no reason other than her teacher did, and she wanted to be a teacher.
Oh.
And she became a teacher. Now she is a teacher. Whereas if I have it right, is your daughter not a pilot?
My daughter was an airline pilot,
Okay.
but now she is a therapist. She went back to school and became a clinical therapist.
Beautiful. I like the metaphor though, because we always say on this show, librarians are doctors of the mind. You know,
Librarians were, yes, I wanted to be a teacher or a librarian.
I think in many ways you've done both. So this book, Madeline, published in 1939 by Ludwig Bemelmans.
Bemelmans.
And I can see it's in its 85th printing.
It's still as wonderful as ever. In fact, when I was a senior in high school, I belonged to a modern dance troupe. And one of the things that we did, I think this is right, we created a dance to go with Madeline.
Do you remember it?
Oh, there's George. That's my husband.
Hi, George.
Wait, who's taking pictures without my permission? Because
I told my paparazzi at the airport just to hang back for an hour. Just kidding. We know why it's formative. We know it was formative. Is there a why?
Yes, because it was a book and it was magical and I loved it. And that made me love books and want to go and get more. And once I learned to read, in my day, you didn't learn to read at 4 or 5. You learned to read in first grade, Dick and Jane and Baby.
Dixie's Ball. James,
but that was okay. That was okay. But to me, stories were something else. And by then I was making up stories inside my head. I never had to write them down. And then from Madeline, the next books that I remember that were formative, maybe because I own them, who knows, were the Oz books. And it was a whole long series of many, many, many books. And I'm not a fantasy person. I'm much more into
talking about
reality.
The Wizard of Oz?
It starts with The Wizard of Oz, and then there's a whole series that
it's so embarrassing though that I didn't know there's a whole bunch of more Oz books.
And the great thing is that when George and I met 38 years ago, we talked about both having grown up with, we owned the whole series of the Oz books. And if only our mothers hadn't gotten rid of them, we would have 2 first edition series, because we had every book.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But I don't know that I don't know that those books had anything to do with anything except they were books.
Yeah.
And they were stories. And I liked that. And I read them myself. But not long after that, I think my mother saw an ad in the newspaper, and it was for the Betsy Tacy books. And I don't even know if there were, if the series was finished then. Maybe it was, but she said, she showed it to me and she said, would you like to read these books?
What are the Betsy Tacy books?
Oh, it's an incredible series. This is a Betsy Tacy book.
You brought one here?
I brought one called Heaven to Betsy and Betsy in Spite of Herself. But it starts when it starts with Betsy and Tacy, two friends, and they're very young. They're 5 or 6. And it goes, and the series takes you through Betsy's marriage. I love it so much. It makes me cry.
No, it's beautiful. Please.
And when they re-released these books not that many years ago, they asked women writers who had grown up on them to do forwards. And so I see that the forward of the book that I've brought to show you is by Laura Lippman, whose newest mystery we have here right now on the table. And I wrote the forward to, I'm not sure which one, Betsy and Tacy Go Over the Big Hill, I think. I really wanted to do one for the older books, which is what Laura has done, but I was asked to do that one, and so I did it. Because there were so many women writers. And maybe someday they'll ask women writers who grew up on my books, because there's surely a lot of them, and that's very exciting. But the fact that so many of us, my best writer friend when I started to write was Norma Klein. She died when she was way too young, but she and I grew up on Betsy Tacy books, and so did Anna Quinlan, and so did Laura Lippman, and so did Nora Ephron and Delia Ephron, and so many women of my generation who became writers. These are the books. These books were formative books, because they made me feel that I was inside them. I was part of the story. I wanted to be part of the story. And when I did start to write, I wanted to write realistic fiction the way Maud Hart Lovelace had done it for her generation. I mean, these books seem like they were written just for me. And yet I know that they were really written way before I was this age. I mean, they were written, I think Maud Hart Lovelace and my mother were born in the same year.
Your work does that too for people, right? People fall into the stories. They identify with Margaret. They identify with Sally. I read this again last night, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I can see my own children in the characters of Fudge, that you've described. How does a writer create a world that readers can fall into?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know how it works. It's something that I could do. I never thought about it. I mean, those stories were in my head, not specific stories, not Fudge, but stories were going around in my head from the time I was 8. But I never wrote them down.
And when you say,
but I had them.
And when you say stories were going around in my head, what do you mean by that? Like you were just playing around with making up a character and what would happen to that character, or tell me about how
Yeah, I mean, I would bounce a ball against the side of my brick house. And it always goes with something physical, just what I tell people who want to write. If you're having a hard time, you have to get up and do something else. And it's while you're doing something else, walking, riding a bike, bouncing a ball against the side of your house, washing dishes, bathing a baby. Mm-hmm. It's when you're doing something else, just taking a shower. Oh, great ideas in the shower. That your mind is free to roam. And that's when I've always been able to solve the problems of writing the story. But that's not where the story came from. I don't know where it came from.
Well, that's beautiful.
Comes from, who knows?
Yeah. Well, maybe there's a neurological or a scientific or a things that happened in a prior life. I mean, who knows? But, famed Key West resident Ernest Hemingway has that famous quote that whenever he got stuck in his writing, when he was living in Paris, he would go walk down by the river. And then he would always solve it in his head, go back and finish the story. Yeah,
walk is good.
Yeah.
Walking. Anything physical, I think. For me, it has to be something physical. Mm-hmm.
How do you organize your books?
What do you mean organize?
Well, if I went into your house and you showed me...
how do I organize my bookshelves?
Yeah.
Oh, totally haphazardly. In New York, where I have books that go way back, books that I never brought to Key West, but I have a bookshelf because I still have a little apartment in New York. They are organized in such a strange way. They're organized by fiction and by nonfiction, and there's a fireplace between them. And then my fiction shelves, the great thing about that is to look at those books that go way back, 70s, let's say, early 70s, maybe before that. And a book, for me, takes me back to where I was, time and place when I read that book. I mean, the first Joyce Carol Oates book I ever read was Them. I found out that she and I were the same age, and I wasn't writing at that time. I had 2 babies. They were playing in a little sandbox in our backyard. But I was fascinated, and my uncle may have told me that it was a wonderful book. He was an English teacher in high school. And I was reading this book, and the kids were playing, and I knew it was time to take them in for their bath. And I knew I was supposed to start supper because I had a very 50s marriage then. And supper was supposed to be ready when he got home.
Together with the pipe and slippers?
No, we didn't do pipe and slippers, no. And I just couldn't put that book down. And so, if I see that book on my shelf, I am that young woman in her 20s with 2 babies, and I'm sitting in that backyard reading this book that I can't put down.
Wow.
It says as much about me and where I was when I read each of these books as it says about the book. Mm-hmm. I could tell you more about that than why was this book so special to me? Why it was so different. It was completely different.
Totally.
It was completely original.
And you have the vivid, I don't know if anyone's ever said photographic memory, but you have this, you can place the scene of hiding Madeline in the bottom of the
kitchen toy drawer.
Kitchen toy drawer. You can tell me about
Betsy Tacy.
And it's
yes,
beautiful.
And that was in my little girl bedroom, where I spent from age 2 to age 18.
See, I love
maybe
that,
19.
I love that you can call
bedroom.
Places to mind. I'm the only one of my friends whose parents still live in the house that I grew up in.
Oh.
So whenever I go back to the suburban house, like whenever me and all my elementary school friends get together, we go to my house because it's the basement that my friends remember with the ping pong table that they remember with the old weird green and purple sponge paint on the wall. Do you try in your life to preserve senses of place? Do you keep, for example, an old room intact or an old do you have that as a purposeful part of your life?
I don't think that it's deliberately purposeful. Do I keep it? Yeah, but it's all in my head. Mm-hmm. I should do more with it. I'm thinking of doing that. That's the only book I have left that maybe I want to write.
Which one?
It's kind of, I don't know what it is yet, but it's like my first 12 years. Memories, places.
Like a memoir.
People. Well, but a different kind of memoir that I have in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard you say before that you don't like to talk about books while you're writing them. So
I haven't started writing it. Okay, I don't know if I ever will. I have told my husband about it, and he would like me to sit down and start writing it. But, I'm here all the time, and I love being here in the bookstore.
Yes. And do you have, you mentioned that you were asked to write the foreword. And you mentioned also that you might be so lucky as to have great women authors forward your books. Can I just ask, do you have authors that you think would be great to write the foreword of your books?
Oh, I don't think about that.
No.
I mean, I do have a lot of younger writer friends, women writer friends. Yeah. There are a lot of guys too, but...
Did you say women writers for a reason? When you said I'd love to have women, was it specifically women, or would you have... I'm not auditioning for the job, just so you know. I'm just like curious.
I like the guys who grew up on my books too.
Okay.
I think it's great, by the way, when boys read books about girls and girls read books about boys. And I have had many letters who said, I learned everything about girls from reading your books, from from
Are You There, God Is Me,
guys.
Margaret? Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think it's good.
Why do people do that enough? Can we do that more, do you think? Is there ways
I think we should do that more. And I've learned so much in the store. I see that all the time, especially grandparents. And they'll say, but this is about a girl, and I don't think he'll read about a girl. They never say this is about a boy, and I don't think she'll read about a boy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you're saying, and I'm agreeing with you, that they're probably wrong, because I grew up on the Babysitters Club on my sister's bookshelf. And frankly, if you wanted me to keep confessing here for some reason, I also flipped through her Tiger Beats and stuff like that, and her YM magazines. Because there was this thing called Say Anything, and it was like girls' embarrassing confessions of, getting a period with white jeans in the school. And I would read that, and I'd be like,
that's
what
good.
is that? Yeah, I was so curious about it.
And girl, I mean, the more we understand, I think the more we see the similarities.
Some of your books have sort of steamy scenes, and I wondered. You said you may remember a book, The Adventures of Augie.
The Adventures of Augie March.
Augie March.
So let's
has
just
a steamy
say
scene, right?
It does, at least one. But so there were no YA books. I mean, there was no such thing. I mean, there were Sherry Ames nurse, stuff like that. But I wasn't really interested in that. So by the time I was in 7th grade, I was in my parents' bookshelves. And I do say, and I really mean it, and I don't know if it's because my mother just wasn't aware or what, but the best gift that my parents gave to me was the gift of reading is a great thing, the message that reading is a great thing, and the freedom to choose my own books.
Right. There was no censorship.
No, there was no censorship in my house. No, it was a good thing. And I had a very nervous mother, but books were a good thing, and reading was a good thing. And so the fact that I was sitting on the floor now in my own house, again, the fireplace and books on each side, and pulling books down and reading them. Yeah, I pulled down Ayn Rand. I mean, I found that.
The Fountainhead?
The Fountainhead, yes, I did. I had no idea of her politics or anything else. It was just that it was interesting to read it. And a guy did bite a woman on the breast. And my friends and I thought, this is the craziest thing we've ever heard in our
That's
life.
in The Fountainhead?
Yes, we were 13.
Howard Roark.
Yes,
Dominique,
Howard Roark.
maybe, if I'm getting the names right.
Yes, yes.
And
then I found who did you say? I found The Adventures of Augie March by
Saul Bellow?
By Saul Bellow, and that was great. And yes, I read the whole book, but I did come upon this very sexy scene.
And sometimes
I don't know if there sexy scenes anymore in books. I'm not finding them.
Well, why isn't there?
I don't know. I did read a new book last year, and I put on my little I thought it was a very good book. It's called, I have it here. We'll go look. Something about the Solomons. What are we going to do about the Solomons or something? I loved it. It was a first novel, and I really tried to hand sell it, and I did. And I said it's different, and it's the characters are interesting, the setting is interesting, and it's sexy.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, and we need it more, because it's a much better way to learn than pornography, which is how kids are learning.
Watching it,
right?
Yeah.
Watching it, not reading about it. The emotions, the intimacy. Am I? You agree with me, or am I
sure. I think, yeah. I'd rather have them read a sexy scene, right?
I wondered if you have a white whale book, Judy, like a book that you have been wanting to read your whole life that you haven't for some reason, or maybe it's like the white whale, maybe it's defeated you. Like,
you know what? I have never read Jane Austen, which embarrasses me to admit, because I guess we didn't read her in school. And then I grew up and I never did. And now I see people just madly in love with everything Jane Austen. And I think, I have to make time for that. And I've seen all the movies. but I haven't ever read Jane Austen. Oh, shame, shame,
No,
shame.
it's not shame. We have a rule on our show: no book guilt, no book shame.
Okay, no book guilt.
No book guilt. So
guilt.
so we also don't want guilt around like I haven't read it and my pile's too big and I don't forget that guilt. No shame, meaning that I'm allowed to talk to you about the Babysitters Club, even though I'm a 38-year-old man. And you know, someone on the show could similarly say 50 Shades of Grey was really formative to me because it taught me about whatever, right? Like we have no book guilt, no book shame. And we think eliminating those things from the book world will enable more people to love reading without pretense.
So when I opened the store and our wonderful mentors, who I call the mothership, Books and Books in Coral Gables, Mitch Kaplan and his crew, they came down and they order our books for us. And here suddenly we were a bookstore. We didn't know what we were doing, but all of a sudden we had a bookstore just because George and I wanted a good bookstore in Key West. And we tried to get Mitchell to open one, but it didn't work out. And he said, if you guys are going to have to find a place and open your own store. So we did. So now we're in our third season and we have come a long, long way, baby. But when I looked at our original stock, we didn't have all of Philip Roth. We didn't have all of one of my favorite writers. Oh my God, I can't do names. We didn't have John Updike books. We didn't have the whole Rabbit series that was so important to me reading it. So we had to get it, and we have it. And we haven't sold it, but I need to know that it's here in my bookstore. I need to know that Philip Roth is here in my bookstore because American Pastoral is so important to me. When I was stuck writing In the Unlikely Event.
I recently read that book, American Pastoral. Amazing.
It's an amazing book. And I took it down how did he do this? How did he do that?
You were writing In the Unlikely Event?
Yeah, and when I got really stuck or I needed inspiration, that was a book. So that book is right behind you on our staff pick.
Which one?
Bookshelves. Well, see.
That one down there?
Well, that's The Plot Against America.
But there's Philip Roth. And I can see your staff picks, well, by the way, has like beautiful write-ups about each book.
Well, yes, we have.
It's staff pick, and here's why.
I mean, Tobias Wolff's This Boy's Life. I love that. I adore, and he's gone now because sold out so well. Gary Steingart. I'm a huge fan of Gary Steingart. And Little Failure is a memoir, a book that I just adore. So I hand sell it a lot.
I love gushing about books with you. If there is a book that you could delete from your brain so that you could read it again for the first time, what book would that be?
You know, there's so many books to read. I don't feel that I have to delete one so that I could read it again. I'm not a person who reads the same book over and over. I know a lot of people do that, and that's great. But I'm always on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's so many. I'm looking here, and there's so many brand new, really exciting books to read. I love Curtis Sittenfeld. So, do you know Curtis Sittenfeld? You need to know Curtis Sittenfeld.
A specific book you recommend?
Well, her first book is called Prep. Prep. My daughter introduced me to Prep whenever it first came out, and I thought, this is one of the best books I've ever read.
What makes it good?
What makes a book good?
What makes it deletable?
I don't want to delete it. I don't want to delete it from my brain and read it again. It's just so good. It's so real. It's about young people.
Yeah.
And then her next book, I'm not sure if it was her next book, but I'm a big fan of her work. An American, George.
No, it's okay. George, do you have a...
He's my memory. George, what's Curtis Sittenfeld's next book about? The American Wife? Is that what it's called? Is that what it's called? An American Wife. Just a brilliant book. She's just that good.
Wow.
So we were thrilled when she came. She came here for the literary seminar, and she was in our store. And that was very exciting. You know, she's a young writer, and she's great.
A lot of our conversation today has been circling around childhood, right? Because we've talked about Madeline, we've talked about Heaven to Betsy, we've talked about the books and the stories that filled your life with not necessarily formativeness, but sometimes inspiration or turned you on to love of stories and reading.
Absolutely,
and
that's what kids need. Excuse me, I just have to interrupt because when people come into the store and say, "I can't get my daughter to read, I can't get my son to read." So the first thing is if there's no physical reason that they can't read, then it's because they haven't found the book. They haven't found that book that's going to capture them. And it's not the same book for every child. It's like you have to find out, you have to know, what does your child love? You know, and yes, you can introduce stories that may have nothing to do with what they love. If they love sports, you can still introduce stories that don't have anything to do with sports, but it's a question of finding the book that they love that's going to turn them on to reading.
I mean, I often get the sort of my 12-year-old boy does not read. What do you say to that?
That's really rough. That's a really rough time. And then it like if I'm asked that question, that's a really hard question because they're between this and that. What do they like? What do they want to read? You know, George and I have both recommended The Boys in the Boat to, the 13-year-old boy who likes stories about maybe sports, something. I mean, there's a great book, reads like the best novel. History, it's very, very hard. It's always been true.
Yeah. I went to the bookstore recently near my house and I said, my son's 2 or I think at 3 at the time, 3. And I said, can you give me an older kid's book, but that I could read to him and maybe censor anything super violent or anything. And the bookseller was so good, Type Books in Toronto. And he said, let me give you a book that's thrilling, but not scary. And he gave me The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, written in 1964, the basis of the movie The Iron Giant. So it's not the basis of the movie Iron Man, even though it's called The Iron Man. It's basis of the movie The Iron Giant. I read it to my son, worried that it might be, because it's like written for 8 to 12-year-olds, right? He was enthralled. He was captivated. His eyes were big. He was, shaking with excitement. So then I moved on to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, another sort of, they say, 10-year-old book. But for a 3-year-old, maybe you censor what happens to like Augustus Gloop in the Chocolate River or something, but like it's thrilling. So I feel like there's a need to differentiate between thrilling and scary and give people, you gave Boys in the Boat to 13-year-old, because I wouldn't have thought of that for a younger kid. Let them read way up to things that are...
you know what?
Yeah.
You know what makes me sad about that?
Okay.
I think that people who are brilliant at picture books are the geniuses of the whole children's book, whatever we want to call it.
Oeuvre or whatever, whatever that big word is.
I think, and to not, to skip that is such a shame because they'll never go back to picture books. And I love picture books. I'm not saying don't read them that, but why? I mean...
Yeah.
Okay, so people read Harry Potter, so you might as well start Harry Potter.
Yeah, we definitely bookend the book, the Iron Man, with a lot of Oliver Jeffers and Nuffle Bunny and Mo Willems and Elephant and Piggy and stuff. But you're talking about innocence here, Judy, and your books deal with innocence a lot. Are there ingredients to innocence?
I don't ever think about innocence. I don't think about children and innocence.
You don't? You don't think it's something that it's worth protecting? Like when you say don't read too far.
No. I'm just saying, don't skip over a whole area of absolutely delightful books to read with your child.
Yeah. And when you think about reading with your children or your children's children, do you have, is there a book is it Madeline, or do you pull something else out of your bookstore or book cupboard?
Well, my children are in their 50s. My only grandson is 20, in his late 20s. But when he was little, we used to make deals at night because he loved it. So he would get into bed and he would say, 7 books, Noni. He called me Noni. And I would say, how about 3? And he would say 6 books. And it was, how about 4? And we would decide on how many books. Of course, he was asleep before 6 books, but that was such a pleasure reading to him.
It's beautiful, Judy. I love what you're doing. I feel like, you, after such a successful and within such a successful career as an author, to decide that your local community in Key West needed a bookstore, that
we needed a bookstore.
Yeah, you needed a bookstore.
George and I wanted a good bookstore in our town. We didn't have to do it, but it seemed to be the only way to get it. To do it. And now I love it. Now I'm totally hooked.
Do you want to give myself and the listener a really quick tour? Because we're not plugged in. So, and you mentioned earlier that you wanted to take me around after. If you're okay with it.
I was going to show you books that I loved so much that I thought I would forget.
Well, I love that, and maybe we can close off by you just kind of giving our listener and myself a little tour of this bookstore. So where she's standing up, we pulled the microphones out. I will follow you around.
Okay, so right behind you, I love to do these. I love to put out the bestseller lists and the staff pick lists, and we use the indie bestseller list.
Oh, the indie-bound bestseller
We use the indie-bound,
and
in combination with the New York Times. And that gets a lot of different books up here, and I really like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at When by Dan Pink, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Astrophysics.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a huge bestseller.
That's an amazing book, an amazing title. I see Educated, a memoir by Tara Westover.
You're looking in nonfiction now.
Okay.
If you come over
look
here,
to my left.
You see Asymmetry, which I recently read, which I thought was really, really good. And I've been hand selling a lot of Little Fires Everywhere. I adore it. I love Celeste Ng. Everyone loves A Gentleman in Moscow. That's a book I haven't read yet, but my husband has. We kind of take turns, which one we read. Everybody loves that book. Everybody who comes in. I'm just seeing.
This whole wall is all bestsellers.
And staff pick.
Oh, and staff picks.
And I have on my cards are right now. They change all the time because there's so many books. And these are all paperback books, and they all have little staff recommendation cards. Lee Smith's A Writer's Life, Dime Store.
May I read the card that you've written underneath it? It says,
I'm awful at this. I am terrible. That's why I can't blurb. You can read what it says, but I am hopeless.
Oh, well, it says, I think it's good. It says, if you've read Lee Smith's novels, or even if you haven't, you'll love her funny, compassionate voice and her story of growing up in the Appalachian South, written by Judy B.
That's what I call myself.
/ staff. And this is for Dime Store, A Writer's Life. And I'm looking at, I'll take a picture of this. Is that your writing?
Yes.
You wrote that. Oh, beautiful.
And this one, Emily is outstanding at writing staff pick cards. And she and I both loved Edgar and Lucy, a novel by Victor Lodato. Mm-hmm. And Emily wrote funny, heartbreaking, joyful, and full of suspense, everything you want in a book. And then I wrote in the bottom, I just finished, loved a wonderful book.
From Judy B.
The Knicks, George and I, we all so loved The Knicks, best book of last year. And there are 2 staff rec cards here, one from George, which is a good one, and then one from me, which is usually I pay no attention to the back of the book blurbs. I know how they get written.
Which is a lot of handshakes and massages and things like that. Okay.
But in this case, they are all true. This is a great American novel. I cannot put it down. And it's fun to read. And we sold tons of these books.
The Knicks by Nathan Hill.
Yes, a wonderful first novel.
Keep the tour going. I'm excited. Where are we going to go next?
Oh, well, here's Silver Sparrow, Tayari Jones, whose new book. Whoops, where is Tayari's book? It should be right there. It's on the front table. Probably we sold so many out of here. It's not here anymore. Tayari was here, but she got snowed out. That is, she was due to be here, and her publisher was here in Key West staying with me, and we were all ready for Tayari's visit. And the snowstorm hit New York, and the airport. Thank you, Robin. Robin's just handed me An American Marriage, which I will now put back up on the shelf where it belongs, somewhere here.
Judy's just leaning down to put An American Marriage by Tayari Jones back on the shelf.
Yes. And she was snowed out. The airports were closed. And it was like, oh no, what are we going to do? And she was kind enough to be with us over the phone. George got a big blow up of her face had it made. And her publisher sat on one side of her picture and I sat on the other side. It was like she was there.
Oh my gosh.
She was on the phone and she was so good. Because she has a great voice and she was so warm and generous and funny and wonderful. And the audience, I think, really believed that she was with us.
That's beautiful.
So it was a wonderful evening, even though she wasn't here.
I'm looking behind you right now, Judy. I see this table where you just sat at, all the cards that you kind of personally curated. My book, which you're kindly picking off the floor, that I want to give to you later, and a book I'd love for you to sign. I see lots of windows, lots of books in the windows, lots of lights coming in here.
We just did all the windows yesterday. We have a lot of volunteers. We're a nonprofit store, so we have only 3 paid employees, and everyone else is a volunteer. And we had a volunteer yesterday with really long arms, a very tall, lovely woman, and we had to move the table away from the window here, and she was able to get in and dust all of the shelves. And then we were redoing all the books that need to be changed every 2 weeks. Our mentors from Books and Books taught us well.
Yeah.
They came down
Fill
and
the windows
said,
with books.
And not just fill the window with books, but change up the displays constantly. So somebody comes in, someone was here yesterday and she said, I want a book. And it was right there. Now, where is it? And I'm like, well, we change the displays all the time. What book is it? She couldn't remember the title, but she knew what it was about.
It's a beautiful store with the light, the books, and by the way, also over a dozen customers shopping, which also makes it pretty. And you have been given us such a gift here, Judy. I think I speak on behalf of the many people that are going to listen to this to say, the works you've produced, the lives you've changed. We talk about formative. Are You There, God? Has already been. Are You There, God? It's Me, Mark. Has already been someone else's formative book on this show. And I'm sure that's not the first Judy Blume book that's going to happen over our 1,000 formative books. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you, and I'd love to ask if you have any final thoughts or words of advice you'd like to leave us with.
Just keep reading and keep enjoying.
Hey everyone, it is just me. It is just Neil again. Wow, thank you so much to Judy Blume for sharing her formative books with us. Madeline, Heavens to Betsy, and of course the Oz series. These books really shaped her, grew her, or I guess it depends whose version of formative you take, whether it was my version to shape her or her version that I already had stories in my head, Neil. They just helped me love reading more. But either way, it was nice of her to talk about them. And I don't know if you could really hear it. I hope you did. There was just so much love between Judy and George, her husband. He was there in the bookstore with us the whole time. He was walking around. He was taking pictures of us. He was Judy's brain, her memory, as she called them, providing titles and authors whenever she forgot one. And it was beautiful. It was really remarkable. And even afterwards, when we stopped recording, she signed my copy of Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. And there was a number of people who had gotten there from cruise ships, waiting to get Judy Blume to sign her book. So she very kindly and generously signed their books. And George was really nice. He was like, you know what, we got to get going. We've got somewhere to be. He was protecting her and he was helping her and loving her. And it was just so beautiful. So I left the bookstore. I walked out. I got some spicy fish tacos from a taco truck, doused in hot sauce, before heading back to the airport. And I looked back and it was a beautiful moment. All 3 of us, you, me, and Judy, sitting down and talking about formative books. And now, if you've made it this far in the podcast, I want to welcome you to the end of the podcast club. This is one of 2 clubs we have for 3 Books podcast. Of course, this is the first one, end of the podcast club, and the second one is a secret club. The only way to get a clue on how to join the secret club is, of course, to call our phone number, 1-833-READ-A-LOT. If you want to learn more about our secret club, it's 1-833-READ-A-LOT. But I can't say more than that. And now let's go to the phones.
Hey, Neil. This is Andy Armstrong in Carthage, Missouri. I actually teach high school here in town. This is my first year teaching high school. And this is actually my hometown. And at the beginning of this school year, I noticed that my students were a little cynical, negative, and stuck in their ways and tended to focus on the worst parts of life and not so much on the positive. So I got 35 copies of the Book of Awesome, and I threw out some of our literature we were supposed to teach, and I had the kids read the Book of Awesome instead, and then we started talking about it and trying to find things that made life worth living, and we actually made a wall of awesome that we put up in my classroom, and you actually liked the tweet that I posted of it, and I remember running around my classroom at the beginning of the school year being like, Neil Pasricha saw my tweet, we're buddies now, we're best friends. So I guess we're best friends, just so you know. If any of my students find out about this, just tell them that we talked, and we'll be cool. All right, thank you for covering my butt there. I'm actually really looking forward to the 3 Books podcast. I want to use it in class. I want my students to talk at the beginning of the year when we go into the library for the first time about the books that have changed them and affected them, and trying to help them find more books. And I'm really hoping that I can, use your podcast and kind of ride your coattails into my classroom, because I think my students could benefit a lot from this kind of a conversation. I think they need this kind of conversation. So I just want to thank you for leading me to it, and then for giving me the opportunity to lead them to it. And I promise not to tell them about the fan club or the super secret password or anything. I'll just make sure that they listen to the whole episode. Thank you, Neil, for everything. Bye.
Thank you so much, Andy from Carthage, Missouri. I love that you're a first-year teacher. That is amazing. I love first-year teachers. They're just bright and sparkly and full of energy. They toss out the prescribed curriculum and buy books of awesome. That's amazing. And as you may or may not know, my dad is a retired high school teacher. That's how he came to Canada. He was the first high school physics teacher in the board of education that we kind of grew up in, east of Toronto. And my wife, Leslie, is also a teacher. She teaches special ed elementary school students. So I'm surrounded by teachers. I always joke they're the only ones that can answer my questions. So kudos to you for creating the wall of awesome. I absolutely give you the fist bump. We are friends. Tell your students, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing 3 books in the classroom. If you're a teacher out there and you have other ways or ideas that this show can be effective in your classroom, let me know, because we are open to ideas on things we can do on the website, things we can do on the show to make it more relevant to schools. And now let's talk about one of our highlighted reviews of the chapter. As you know, we always like to pick out a review off iTunes. It's very hard to get reviews on podcasts. How many reviews have you left for any podcast ever, right? Like, if you're like me, you hardly ever do that. So we would love it if you took 2 seconds to just drop a review in. And here is our review of the chapter. It's from Bo Luke Duke, 1234. He says, "You don't need to be particularly well-read to enjoy this." Well, that's good to know, because I'm not. The books are no doubt front and center, but they serve chiefly as primers for some really terrific conversation. Neil has a crisp interviewing style that keeps the discussion focused and on pace. Worth a listen. Thank you so much, Bo Luke Duke. As you know, you can email us. 3books.co has all of our contact info. Drop us a line, say, "I am the Bo Luke Duke whose review you just read," and we will mail you a signed copy of any book you like. Okay. And finally, before we close, let's do the word of the chapter. The word of today's chapter is troupe. Judy mentioned it. She was in a troupe, Troupe. This means, I'm just going to pull up the definition here, a group of dancers, actors, or other entertainers who tour to different venues. The interesting thing about this word is, of course, it comes from the French, early 19th century, from the French version of the word troupe, Troop, which of course is a military unit, a military subunit, small formation of cavalry subordinate to a squadron. So the French took the word troupe, Troop, and they pronounced it the same way. They spelt it differently, Troup, and now we use it in English as a group of dancers, actors, or entertainers who tour to different venues. I will let someone else interpret the sort of metaphysical meaning of using a military analogy and turning it into like stage performers. Either way, it's a neat history and a great word for today's word of the chapter. And now I'll sign off saying thank you all so much for listening to Chapter 6 of 3 books featuring the one and only Judy Blume. Until next time, you are what you eat and you are what you read. Take care, everybody.